My parents divorced when I was early, so my father and I, the only thing we agreed upon musically was Creedence Clearwater Revival, where my father enjoyed them. I did as well. But even like Bruce, I remember bringing the Born in the USA album over to, his house to listen to it, and he hated it. He was like, this is anti-America. He's pretty much saying F you to America on the title song. He just hated Bruce. So we didn't share anything musically outside of CCR.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is a new friend. We met online. I'm already best friends with Dave. First off, he does a podcast, so I always love fellow podcasters. He does a podcaster called Beer in Front, which means you have to love. And in his Twitter bio, he says he loves calling out hypocrites. So I feel like we are brothers. Welcome to the show,
Yes.
Dave.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be on.
Yeah. So tell my audience a little about yourself.
I am 53. I live in balmy Chicago. It's in the 40s right now. Let's see. It's 45, so it's warm weather here. Lived in Chicago my whole life. Um, Married, happily married. Have a nice little pooch here that you might hear barking in the next few minutes. Uh, I started a podcast. You know, bad luck, just bad luck. And Springsteen did cover that with Mike Ness once, Bad Luck.
Yeah.
But I started the podcast right before the pandemic. And what I wanted to do was go to breweries, talk to people, and enjoy, whatever beer we're having. And then, Corona got in the way. So it's kind of veered off its path where now I call, and I call them jagoffs, which I think is a Chicago and a Pittsburgh term.
Yeah.
For just calling out whether it's politicians, whether it's, celebrities, mostly they're hypocrites. So
Yeah.
I call them out. I think once we get back to normal, what I want to do is just sit and talk, two people face to face over a beer. We'll discuss the beer. So hopefully soon that's what the podcast will be more about.
I've often thought of, and I am not a big drinker, but I adore the process of making bourbon. So I have often thought that it would be an interesting podcast, and I'm sure someone has done it, but to talk about the different bourbons and talk about the
Oh yeah,
process
there's
and
a few out
discuss.
there.
Yeah. So I think your beer podcast could be interesting. And, our buddies on Rock in the Suburb, they talk about every episode they're discussing what beer and what IPA or what lager or whatever they're having
Mm-hmm.
while they're recording. So I think that'll be a great podcast and that'll be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. What made you think you wanted to do this?
I've always been a huge Springsteen fan, and I forget the Twitter feed that was talking about, joining up with different
Yeah.
podcasters. And then I saw yours and I'm like, Bruce, oh, I'm in for this. Absolutely. So that's when I started following you and listening to your show. And I'm like, no, absolutely. I'd love to come on and, talk about my experiences. And, I've been a Springsteen fan since, probably the late 70s.
Okay.
I started listening to him when I was 12, 13 years old. So yeah, I've been a Springsteen fan for a long time.
Well, wonderful. So talk to me first off, how are you and your wife and your pup doing during this crazy time?
Uh, I'm not doing bad. I still go to work, even when this all broke a year ago. I was considered essential. So, I still go to work every day. My wife has been working from home for a year. So I think it's easier for me because I still go out and breathe fresh air and, you know, communicate to other human beings as opposed to having meetings on Zoom or working from home. So for me, it hasn't been as bad, but I miss going to shows. I miss going to a restaurant or sitting in a bar or, things like that. I do miss just random human interaction. And I think for a lot of people, that's been lacking in the last year.
Dave, last night, well, first off, I'm kind of where you are.
Mm.
I do, the company I work for provides roadside assistance for
Okay.
RVs. So we were considered essential as well. So for m- most of March, most of April, and half of May, we all worked from home. Then toward the middle of May, we went back in the office, and I've been working in the office since. So
Okay.
to a lot of days, it just seems normal to me.
Mm.
You get up. Now, luckily, I had started this job in February, and just by grace of God, it's like less than 5 miles from my house. I just
Okay,
got
good.
lucky. So, so I was joking with the, I'm going through a tank of gas once a month. It's so nice. But I drive to work. I do my job. I run a contact center, so a bunch of people on the phone answering calls, and I'm doing whatever as a boss I do, and then drive home. So with the exception of we've gone to restaurants a couple of times. Texas is pretty liberal. We've done a couple of times where we've gone to a restaurant, um, but last night we watched the CNN documentary Jimmy Carter, a rock and roll president.
Okay.
And it was a great documentary. It talked about how much Jimmy Carter loved all kinds of music and how much he used the Allman Brothers and Jimmy Buffett and Charlie Daniels to all raise money for him when he was running for president. And then the whole thing is how many concerts they had at the White House. And that music was just a big part of his administration. And Linda, my wife, looked over and said, I miss going to shows. And I
Yeah.
looked over and I said, that is a common theme on Set Lusting Bruce, is that not only, God, we wish Bruce was touring, but, and not, let's not forget like Jake or Niels or Little Steven. I mean, just going to a bar where there's a cover band playing and, getting some wings and a couple of soft drinks or beer and just listening to a band play Desperado or something just because they love playing music. I miss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I miss, outside of Bruce, I mean, I like all kinds of music, but
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of punk rock.
Hmm.
And I just miss being in the pit with people. You're hot, you're sweaty, you're
Yeah.
moving around. Yeah, I just miss that.
Yeah, I really do.
So,
And
mhm.
um well, let's talk about, I always like to go to the beginning, Dave. So you said you grew up in Chicago. What kind of music did your family listen to?
My parents divorced when I was early. So my
Okay.
father and I, the only thing we agreed upon musically was Creedence Clearwater Revival, where my father enjoyed them. I did as well. But even like Bruce, I remember bringing the Born in the USA album over to, his house to listen to it, and he hated it. He was like, you know, this is anti-America. He's pretty much saying F you to America on the title song. He just hated Bruce. So we didn't share anything musically outside of CCR. My mother, who I lived with growing up, she always had music on. We always had music in the car or at home, but she was mostly top 40, Motown, things of that nature. But yeah, there was always music, and it's a pretty wide spectrum. Um, but yeah, my mother always, we always had music on in the house.
When did you was it in high school you discovered punk music and fell in love with it?
Yeah, it was actually a little bit later,
Hmm.
like in my early 20s. I'm like, yeah, this is for me. I like this.
You love, is it just the energy and the
The
rawness
energy,
of
the
it?
music, and the artist itself. Like I mentioned, Mike Ness before. Social Distortion
Yeah.
is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I would go see them, whenever they come through. Always like them. I'm more, I'm 53, so I'm more, old school punk as
Yeah.
opposed to the newer stuff.
Okay. Very nice. So I always like to ask this, and sometimes people have trouble articulating, but talk to me about when you discovered Bruce and what about him spoke to you? What about his music?
I think initially, and I was trying to remember like what was the first song I heard. Now it might have been Born to Run on the radio. It might have been Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yeah.
Uh, the first Bruce album I bought was The River, and I was 13 at the time. Uh, so the big hit off of that was Hungry Heart. So, but I just think I remember the keyboards and the pianos and Clarence's sax and like what a well-rounded band this was. And I liked the sound, and then listening to the lyrics, even though I might not have understood them as a 13-year-old, but The River and Independence Day were one of my favorite tracks off, the album itself. And growing older and becoming more mature, then you realize more what he was talking about. But even back then, like a song like Independence Day, I wore out as a 13-year-old.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've shared this before, but I was not a big Independence Day fan till
Mm,
I saw him on the River Tour and him
okay.
doing it live. And then it hit me the idea that he is now older than probably his father was when he wrote
Yeah.
that song. And now then he's coming it from a different perspective. And I
Hmm.
just ended up loving that song. I also, my son now is grown, he's 32, but during the teenage years, we had that natural thing that it's he's
Yeah.
supposed to rebel, he's supposed to try to find his own way. And we had that where you, as Bruce said, it was clear we love each other but just don't know how to talk sometimes. And
Yeah.
so powerful song, very powerful song.
Hmm.
That's great. So talk to me about your journey. So you bought the river, you're listening. So what were your next steps in discovering Bruce?
After listening to The River, now, this is something that would never happen in 2021. But
Yeah.
back then, I delivered paper. So I had a little income in from being a paper boy. So I remember buying Darkness on the Edge of Town, which right now would be my favorite Springsteen record.
Yeah.
Um, and the day before I started high school was my first Springsteen concert that it's been renamed, but back then it was called the Rosemont Horizon. So it was probably an idea of how my high school career was going to go. Being the first day of high school, I have no sleep because I've been out for 4 hours watching Bruce the night before. Uh, but yeah, that was the first show I did, and then especially seeing him live, you're hooked. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, you're done. Yeah, you're done. You're just
Yeah.
give it up. You're a Springsteen fan the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
Put it all to rest, as
Yeah,
they say. Yeah, I often say there's two kinds of people: the people that go to their first show and go, boy, that's long. And then the second
yeah,
one are the people that go, oh my goodness, when can I do this again? I want to do
yeah,
that. That's pretty cool. Now,
yeah.
I hear a lot of stories from people that they had to wait till they were older in high school or college because their
Mhm.
parents wouldn't let them go to a show
Yeah.
that early. So sounds like your mom was pretty cool and was supportive of you.
Yeah, I went. I mean, I don't think, and I didn't realize then. This was
Yeah.
pre-internet, where you could go to Setlist FM and see,
Yeah.
oh my God, he plays this many songs.
Yeah.
You figure it's going to be your typical, 60, 90-minute show, and you'll be home by 10 o'clock. So luckily we didn't have the internet back then, and I was able to go to the show.
That's great.
But yeah, I remember I didn't know the song back then, but he opened up with John Fogerty's "Rockin' All Over the World." And, actually afterwards, when you could buy bootleg albums, I bought a bootleg with that. And I'm like, that's what he opened with. And I've been a huge fan of that song ever since.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because with your dad and Creedence Clearwater Revival, yeah, I'm sure there's that connection. That's awesome. So, I always preface this, Dave, with the amount of shows you've seen is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. But for the record, do you count? And how many times have you seen him?
I have seen him 9 times.
Okay.
The first time was on the original River Tour back in 1981. And the last time was 2012 at Wrigley Field. He played 2 shows at Wrigley Field. So I saw both shows then.
That's very nice. Good. So talk to me a little bit. Do you have stories from the shows?
Actually, the shows at Wrigley Field, I had rotator cuff and bicep surgery the week before. So I'm in the middle of everybody with my arm in a sling and on various, painkillers and beer to get me through it. But yeah, that was fun, is being in this massive 40,000 people, and I'm right-handed. It was my right arm. So I'm like, you can't even like raise your fist up in the air to, Badlands or anything else. I'm like, I had to do everything with my left arm, and I looked pretty awkward, but I did it.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, are you White Sox or Cubs? Or not a baseball guy?
No, I'm a huge baseball guy, and I've been Cubs my whole life. I won't get into it too much, but the Cubs owners and myself lean a little differently politically. So
yeah,
I think I'm going to change my allegiance over to the White Sox, where, I was ecstatic when the Cubs won the World Series. I bawled like a baby. But just, I'd rather give my money to better people.
So you can imagine, I am here in Texas, and Mr. Jerry Jones, thank you very much. As a Cowboy fan, I just go, oh, Jerry. Jerry's
making money off of you this week, whether you like it or not.
Yes, he is. Yeah. So why didn't he use some of that and sign Dak? That's all we're scraping. Yeah. Like, if you're going to make all this money off natural gas, because we're freezing, sign our quarterback. That's well, we'll talk about Bruce again, but talk a little bit more about your podcast. So, your plan was to kind of go do beer tastings, visit communication. So you've morphed into kind of temporary. So talk a little bit about why you wanted to do this podcast, and share a little bit about it.
Yeah, like I said, initially I just wanted to be mostly about beer. Now, I don't know about yourself, but initially I'm thinking to myself when I'm, having the ideas and planning the podcast, oh, I could talk 30 minutes about beer. It's a walk in the park. And then you do the first episode all you by yourself, and it's 8 minutes. And it's like, oh, I need to fill up some time. So there's only so much stretching you can do. And especially where I've only had a few interviews on my show. So 90% of my shows is just myself talking about beer. So I had to stretch it. So I'll talk about news of the week. And then our previous president once, I just called the jag off because I forget what I was referring to. And I started receiving good feedback that, oh, they liked that when I called someone out. So I'm like, all right. So then I just went into the Jagoffs of the week, and, I find both of your senators have made the list in Texas. So it's just mostly calling out, people for hypocrisy. Uh, I'm a equal opportunity person. The last show I had 3 Democrats on there, so
Hmm.
most of the time my political leanings are liberal. But if you're a jagoff, you're a jagoff, and I'm going to call you out on it.
Yeah, and I do too. I think the biggest thing going is it is the hypocrisy of the right, and I promise listeners we'll get back to Bruce in a little bit. Um, Makes it hard to, um, you know, they were calling out Biden for wearing a Rolex, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
really, really? I mean, okay, first off, a Rolex is a classic. I would love, if I had had the money, I would buy a Rolex, and use it as a family heirloom. It is something, but really, that is where you want to go with
That
all the.
and the
Go ahead.
and the exercise bike too. You're
Yeah.
calling out Biden for having an exercise bike. That's better than spending money to go golfing every weekend. So I'd rather him spend $4 grand on a bike than spend 100 million to golf.
Yeah. And, when they talk about it, that the amount of money that um, Jagoff in chief, our previous
Yeah.
administration, chief, POTUS, um, they talked about, he made almost $1 billion as president self-directed because of things he did, that like going to his own place to play golf versus like most
Mhm.
presidents go to a local, military base to play golf because one, it's secure, two, it's close. And it is the hypocrisy that bothers me the most. It is just the idea that um, my two senators are horrible, but Michael Burgess is my congressman, and he is on Twitter talking about the American people are suffering, and the Democrats did not listen to one suggestion we had on this, bill, and it was recording this. It's about the end of February. I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean you can't support, the, don't let perfect get in the way of good. And also for the last 4 years, have you guys given any input? Have you taken any input for Democrats? Hell no. So
No.
yeah, I'm furious. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that's where it's kind of heading. But yeah,
Hmm.
hopefully soon I could go back
Yeah.
to what the initial plan was. Having 2 people, or maybe having somebody that works at the brewery, will
Yeah.
sit down and discuss their big beer. We'll talk about it,
Hmm.
and we could lean into other topics, but
Sure.
I would rather it be more about beer and,
Yeah.
human interaction between 2 people, as opposed to me staring at my microphone every week for 45 minutes.
So is there a big brewery in Chicago? Is there a good culture of local brews making beer?
Yes, and actually, like where I live now, I'm walking distance to probably 5.
Yeah.
Chicago is huge. Uh, it's a huge beer community.
Hmm.
I could literally have a beer from a different brewery each week and not scratch the surface. So there's a ton out there. I'm very fortunate that Chicago has a great beer community.
Hmm. Uh, Good, because the I know that I think is Few the bourbon distillery that's in Chicago.
Yeah, Few is around, and there's another one that's really good. If you haven't heard of them, they're called Koval,
Okay.
Koval,
Yeah.
and they do make a bourbon. They make some fantastic gins if you're into gin. But yeah, Few and Koval are big 2 that we have here.
Yeah, that's one of the. I was really sad. We had gone several years ago, Chicago, for a business conference back when you used to travel for business conferences, and I was
Yeah.
disappointed I could not find time um, either like Few wasn't open on Sunday to tour, and so
Hmm.
that's a bourbon my wife really loves. So
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I think that would be a fun show to kind of talk about it, to sample, to do that. That's going to be fun. That I agree
Yeah.
with you. I hope that um, with all the shots going out, with all the thing, we now have a third, vaccine, that maybe we can get back out to enjoying live music and enjoying
Yeah.
sharing a cold one between friends.
Yeah. I have my first vaccine scheduled for tomorrow.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
thank you. I'm not sure what the situation is in
Yeah,
Texas, but I know for myself, it's just hunting down on the computer trying to find whether it's like a Walgreens or CVS type place
yeah.
or somewhere. So literally tomorrow morning, I'm on vacation this week. I'll have to leave my house at 5 a.m. to drive 3.5 hours to get vaccinated and drive back home. There was nothing near me, and that was the closest. And I was prepared to drive 5 hours
Wow.
um, just to get it. But yeah, I just want to get it. My wife's not at that stage yet where she's on the waiting list. Luckily for myself, I'm a little older and a little chubbier. So in Illinois, if you're a little overweight, you jump to the list. So I'm like, thank you for
Well,
my beer gut. That puts me on top.
yeah, I am on the list. I'm diabetic and I'm a cancer survivor. So, and I have a few pounds on me too. So I am on the list,
Yeah.
but I do not know. Every week I get an email from my county saying, you are number like 800, 370, 205, and we're currently at 100 and something, so it's like, but my wife isn't even on the waiting list. But
Okay.
the hope with this third vaccine, and I know that this administration is trying to push where you can get as many as we can. And, I'm just excited because I figure anyone that, I'm not very jealous. I'm just happy. Like anyone who can get a vaccine is one step closer to us getting past this, where I
Yes.
can, Bruce and the band can tour again, where I can go. I've shared this with other people, Dave. I had tickets. Lily Hyatt, who is John Hyatt's daughter,
Mhm.
was going to be in Dallas. I've never seen her live. She had a new album to promote. I had tickets for her. I'd never seen the Eagles, of all things, and they were coming to Dallas, and we had gotten tickets. And I was going to go see Mickey Dolenz and Michael Nesmith touring as
Okay.
the Monkees. And I was like, how fun. I'm old enough to remember, that was the heyday for me. I'm 60, I'll be 62 this summer. So,
Okay.
like, right, that was the heyday of mine. So I would have loved to see them. And now then, you don't get any music at all unless you want to watch a show via YouTube, and it's just not the same.
Now, and even like you don't get to discover any new music
Yeah.
because you're not seeing an opening band or
Yeah.
things like that. So one is I'm getting older. I just feel like I'm listening to the same things. There's nothing new that I'm discovering, and it's kind of sad. So hopefully, once things open up, we'll get to see shows, get to see a new opening act that you're like, wow, these people are really good. I want
Yeah.
to hear more about them.
Yeah. Sorry, let's get back to Bruce. What were your thoughts on
Okay.
Western Stars and Letter to You?
I like Letter to You a lot. Western Stars didn't do much for me, but no, I'm a big fan of Letter to You. I can't wait to hear some of those songs performed live.
Yeah. Did you see the film, Western Stars film?
No, I did not see it, uh, and I don't know why. I just didn't. So I'm sure I will catch it down the road, but
Yeah.
I just know I have not seen the film.
I don't know if it'll make you like the songs more, but I do think the film is definitely worth watching. You'll feel like, hey, this seems like the Jeep commercial because
Yeah.
it's the same director and it is the same theme,
Mhm.
because Bruce talks between every song, and the
Okay.
band that performs the songs live, it's in his big barn is amazing. So I don't know if you'll like the album better, though I've heard other people say that after seeing the film, they like it a little better.
Okay.
Once again, because of my age, I grew up, my parents loved country music, and my mom loved Glenn Campbell. So this felt like, kind of a love letter almost to my mom. So I liked it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I agree with you. And have you got a chance to watch the documentary on Apple TV?
Yes, I have. So that was really good. It
Mhm.
was nice to see the band together, and you just like appreciate, even though you have a couple new members in there,
Yeah.
like this band of brothers and sisters that have been together for so long. You just appreciate, you know, I mean, you have the Rolling Stones that have lasted a long time, but there's very few artists and bands that just last 50 years. And
Yeah.
you appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, you're watching them talk around and they're all, the story, right, is supposedly they reached out to Bruce and said, "Hey, let's not do beat the demo where, you
Yeah.
do a demo and then we've got to go sound like, let's just go." So I think it's fascinating. They're all sitting there with their legal pads and pens and he's
Yeah.
playing the song and they're going. And a lady who was on my show, Betsy Hodges, um, a few weeks ago told me the story that she had in a charity auction, she had won a Zoom call with Max. So
Oh, okay.
she and her friend got to sit. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. She said it ended up being over an hour. And she asked them, she goes, "Okay, like, how do you hear Bruce playing? And then, like, if I was a priest, you come up with the break, and then you do that drum, kind of quick, kind of, almost like this, this beat and exact." And he says, "I just hear the music and I hear what we're going to do." The other thing I love, she says, "Are you tired of looking at Bruce? Are you tired of signing things with Bruce's ass?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No, because that's my view." As the
Yeah.
drummer, that's what I do. I'm watching his backside anyway, to figure out what he's going to do, which I thought was just a really funny story.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sure for him, it's just, he's either
yeah,
looking directly at Gary
yeah,
or,
exactly.
Bruce's rear end. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me. You mentioned Darkness would probably be one of your favorite albums. Talk to me about other favorite songs and albums of Bruce, and why do they mean something to you?
Uh, on Darkness, probably, and things change. We're at different points in our lives, but the one song that I think would always be on my Mount Rushmore of Bruce songs is actually Darkness on the Edge of Town. I
Okay.
love that song. Luckily, when I saw him at Wrigley Field, Eddie Vedder came out and did the song with him. So that
Wow,
was
that's
great to
cool.
hear.
Yeah.
Uh, so Darkness on the Edge of Town is, if it hasn't always been my number one song, it's right there.
Yeah.
Uh, I always liked Downbound Train. Uh, I just like that song. Maybe it's just the quirkiness in me. Listening to Independence Day as a 13-year-old. I
Yeah.
love that song off the Born in the USA album. At my wedding, um, I was in charge of the early music. My wife is in charge of the later music. And I'm like, I have to have a Springsteen song on here. So I put Lucky Day on there,
Oh,
which
nice.
a lot of people, kind of forgot about that album, but
Hmm.
it wasn't my favorite record, but that was a great song. So
Yeah.
that song means a lot to me because I included it in, my wedding. Uh, it, like I said, it changes as we change and evolve over time. Certain songs have different meanings now than they did 40 years ago. Uh, I love, even though it's not on any of his records, there was a compilation for the Italian composer Ennio Morricone, and Bruce did Once Upon a Time in the West, which is always a piece that I've loved. And instead of the opera singer, it's Bruce's guitar, and that's just moving. So if you ever get a chance to hear that, it was off a record called We All Love Ennio Morricone. And there's
Okay.
artists like Yo-Yo Ma plays on there, Metallica, but all of these different artists perform an Ennio Morricone tune. And that is always like touching to me.
Ooh, that sounds perfect. I'll have to check that out. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
I think it's on Spotify, so you might be able to
okay.
grab it there.
Okay, good. So talk to me 2022, hopefully we're going to get live. What are songs that you haven't heard live that you would like to hear? Do you have a few you're
And I
chasing?
went back, I was, in preparing for this, I went to setlist.fm and I'm like, let me go back and see. And all of the shows that I went to were on there. The one song that I've never heard is Adam Raised a King. I've never
Okay.
heard that live. So I would like to hear that. I know it's impossible, but I would give my right arm to hear Jungle Land again with Clarence. But
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. But Jake does
Yeah.
a great job. Um, no, but Adam Raised a King would probably be
Okay.
like the only one that I have not heard live that I
Okay.
would like to. I'd like to hear the band go through it.
Okay. I don't know if you've done this, but um, go to mybossTime.com.
Okay.
This is Elko did this. You set up a free account, and then you go
Okay.
and you select every show you've attended, and then behind the scenes he calculates what's your most heard song, what's your least
Okay.
heard song, what are your rarities, what are songs he very few played that you've heard. He'll tell you what percentage of every album you've heard. It is a rabbit hole that will make you
Oh
hours.
yeah.
You will just go. It's so much fun. My friend Sam loved it, and he says, gosh, I wish someone would do this for Dylan, because he's a huge Bob
Yeah.
fan. He's seen Bob tons of times. He says, I wish someone would do that. Yeah, it's a fun day to do that. um so any final thoughts? Anything you want to share? What if I should have
No,
asked you that I didn't?
probably my favorite Bruce show would be from the Vote for Change tour back in 2004,
Okay.
where my wife at the time, that tour didn't come to Chicago. So we flew to Minneapolis. And that was just amazing because REM was on the bill, who is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Sure.
John Fogerty was there, Bright Eyes. Neil Young came out and did a couple songs. So it was really good. One of my favorite songs from the 92 era with the other band,
Hmm.
uh, Neil came out and did Souls of the Departed with Bruce. And that
Oh,
was
nice.
amazing with,
Mhm.
Neil's just scuzzy guitar playing and the rest of
Yeah.
the E Street Band. But the encore for that was something that I'll never forget because everyone came out, REM, the E Street Band, Neil Young, John Fogerty, and they all did Proud Mary, which
Mhm.
was incredible. Then they did Rockin' in the Free World from Neil, and Michael Stipe and Bruce and Neil, and they all changed vocals and did that, which was great. They did Elvis Costello's What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding, and then they closed it out with Patti Smith's People Have the Power. And
Wow.
that encore itself was just
Yeah,
wow.
that sounds like that's a full show that I'd love right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just probably the most amazing time, even though it wasn't the full 3.5, 4 hour
Hmm.
Bruce show. During the show, Michael Stipe came out and sang. They did Born to Run together. Bruce came out with REM and sang Bad Day. So that was like cool to see the
Yeah,
interaction
absolutely.
between REM and Bruce as well. That
Yeah,
was
that
just a
sounds
phenomenal show.
oh, that sounds really lovely.
Mhm.
Dave, I always like to ask someone who's been a fan that long, how did you feel during the lost years? Like as a fan that long, Bruce fires the E Street Band, and what were your thoughts during those lost years?
Uh, I saw that tour, and actually, that was a really good show.
Yes,
Uh,
I've heard that from multiple people.
you know, the Lucky Town, uh, Human Touch. I think that could have been one great album or CD. as opposed to two mediocre ones. There's some great songs on both that could have been amazing. I don't know. Do we get to where we are in 2021 if he doesn't have that? Maybe the band breaks up if they continued going. Maybe it was a nice little temporary separation. You get to appreciate what you have more than if you just go through a divorce. So maybe it was good. You wish that record would have been one record with the E Street Band, but we all came out of it okay.
When you heard that he was going to tour again with the band, what were your thoughts?
I was like, finally, yes.
Yes.
All is right in the world.
What's funny,
yes, we
Dave?
We can get Max.
Yeah. I
had we can get Max off the talk shows. Yeah.
Yes. I had a guy who told the story that he was sitting at one of the reunion concerts, standing, he's listening, and he says, "This is it. This is the peak of E Street fandom. Like, we'll never get, like, maybe they'll tour every once in a while, but this is it. The band has gotten back together, and, it's downhill from here, but at least we got a great ending." And he said, if I could have gone and told that guy, you've got The Rising, you've got Magic, you've got Wrecking Ball, you have Bruce performing on Broadway, you have an autobiography, you have a Western Stars and Letter to You coming, waiting for you. He said he would have been blown away. Like, no, this wasn't an ending. This was the beginning of chapter 2,
Yes.
And that's great.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he was 100% correct there.
Yeah. All right, Dave, this has been so much fun, but we got to ask you the Mary question. So if you don't normally listen to this podcast, but you are listening because you're a fan of Beer in Front, or you're one of Dave's friends, the Mary question is this. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired, but every year he would take his seniors and they would spend 2 days breaking apart the song Thunder Road. They would look at all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery and the themes Bruce explores in the song. They would compare it to The Road Less Taken by Robert Frost. And at the end of the 2 days, he would look at his class and say, does Mary get in the car? So, Dave, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
If you asked me this when I first heard the song as a teenager, my answer would be yes. You're asking me this now as a 53-year-old that's cynical, jaded. We've gone through everything. Today, 2021, no, Mary doesn't get in the car.
Okay.
I think, in today's things, I think Mary would say, well, I am a beauty. What are you doing? You're telling me I'm not a beauty, but I'm okay? No, sorry. So I think now in 2021, Mary says no. But when I first heard the song, the younger, more innocent, I could romanticize it. Yes, she got in the car. But no, today, no, I don't think she does.
All right. Very good. That is a great answer. Yeah. Dave, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
They could go to, on any podcast platform, you could just, type in Beer in Front. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Beer in Front, all one word. Or if you want to ask me a question about beer or, anything else, you could email me at dave@beerinfront.com.
Wonderful. My friend, I just appreciate you spending time with me this morning. This was a lot of fun. I wish you great success. What are you going to be listening to as you drive 3.5 hours to go get your shot?
I'm going to catch up on some of your past episodes. I do have some other, like on Twitter, there's a podcast community. And unfortunately, there's just not enough time to listen to everybody's podcast that I follow on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I have a backlog that I'm just loading up on my phone. So I'll catch up on my podcast listening. I might throw in Darkness on the Edge of Town
because it's always a good time to hear Darkness. It's always a good time.
Correct.
Well, yes. Dave, thank you so much. This is my friend. Stay safe.
Jesse,
Travel
you as
safe.
well.
I'm excited about you getting a shot. I'm going to be praying that we have better days ahead of us, where you can have live shows where you guys are talking about your beer and talking to the brewmeisters. That would be a lot of fun. So,
Yeah,
listeners, you stay safe. Please remember social distance, wash your hands, wear an effing mask, and let's all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this.
absolutely.
So, for
Jesse,
now,
one day we'll visit you down
yes.
in Dallas and we'll share a beer together, sir.
Well, you should get to, with your working for who you work for. Once
Yeah,
things get to normal, you may be traveling. So if that's the case,
yeah.
definitely let me know so we can meet and we'll share a meal, and that'll be a lot of fun.
Sounds like a plan. I appreciate it, sir.
All right, thank you, listeners. Be good, and we'll talk to you soon. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.